Hey there, everyone. Welcome back again to another episode of Live with Lindsay. As always, so happy to have you back here with us today, and really happy to be back to doing these a bit more regularly. So tonight we're going to be talking with Jayson Krause, who's going to be talking to us about a different way to manage stress more effectively. So Jayson has a history of being on the Canadian national bobsled team as a pilot. He's now a leadership strategist. He's co-created The Science Behind Success, which is an approach to leadership based on the physiology of high performance, and was piloted at the Warrington School of Business in the University of Florida. So he has a lot of expertise in this topic. It's Mental Health Week this week, so I think the timing is really great. I think we can all agree that it's been a bit of a stressful year, and I'm sure we can all use a little bit of learning on how to manage our stress more effectively. So welcome here with us tonight. If you are here, I would love it if you would share where you're listening from in the comments. Let us know that you're here, and I will bring in Jayson. So Jayson, hi. Thanks for joining me here.
Hey, Lindsay, thanks for having me on.
So let's start off by having you share just the path of you moving from bobsled Canadian national team pilot to leadership strategist, and how there's an element of looking at managing stress. I can take my guesses, but I would love to hear it from you.
Well, when I was competing as an athlete, we're under stress constantly. We train in a stressful environment. Of course, the stakes of competition for us is a stressful environment. And when I retired from sport, it was really an exploration for me. When you talk about stress, for example, I spent 8 years as a national team athlete, and I go into the Olympic season ranked top 10. This was in 2006, and training in Montreal just before the season, got a phone call saying my best friend didn't have much longer. He was struggling with cancer, and I flew back, was able to spend time with him. He passed away, and I went into the season, although I was in the best physical shape of my life, I just couldn't pull it together. I was in a state of depression. It was a very challenging time for me. And so I just couldn't meet my fitness standard to go. And I quickly found myself outside of the Olympic Games, and I had to really reflect on the difficult question: what value could I possibly offer the world without the Olympics on my resume? And then that really started to facilitate an exploration where, through another colleague, we started pulling together principles that we were exposed to as athletes, which became The Science Behind Success, which then launched me into the work that I do now with leaders around the world.
Wow. It's so interesting for me to listen to, because of course, when you say, what can I bring to the world without having the Olympics on my resume? That was never a goal for me. So, my identity wasn't built up around that. I've certainly had other experiences, but it just really goes to speak to how much these life-shifting events kind of shake that sense of identity, right? Of who we are and who I want to be in the world, and where am I going from here? And so it sounds like it was like a turning point almost for you to really start those reflections, I guess, having lost your friend.
Oh, well, it was huge. And, whether it's the Olympics or it's something else, for anyone that's watching, I'm guessing they can probably relate that they fall into a trap of destinationitis. How many leaders that create a vision and they think, when I become CEO, then things will be better. When I become VP, or when we IPO as a company, then life will be great. And it's a pretty seductive trap that can set us up for some disappointment, yet rich grounds for exploration.
Yeah, I identify so much with everything you're saying, in that's been a path for me too. And I see it as a path in a lot of the people that I work with, that shifting of sort of having always focused on those externalized goals. And not to say there's anything wrong with having goals. I still have probably way too many of them, but to just coming to a point, whether it's through a huge crisis or not, of realizing, there's something more that I want. And yeah, like I said, and I'm sorry, obviously, for the loss of your friend. For me also, it was really through experiencing death of people close to me that it was a wake up call of, where am I going to go from here? And so, can you talk to me a bit about maybe what you learned through that experience that you've brought into your work? So, you now work with leadership quite a bit. In terms of the principles that you learned, because I'm guessing some of it also extends to, before the loss of your friend, and also what you've learned through your training.
Yeah, when we look at the environment we trained in as athletes, shortly after I retired from sport, someone who was still competing said, "Hey, come on out to the weight room and train with the group. They haven't seen you in a while." And so I hadn't lifted weights in a long time, but I thought, yeah, it's going to be great to connect. And I go to the weight room, and quickly I start training like I'm going after the Olympic dream again. And of course I can lift a fraction of what I could
Right.
before. And I'm doing the bench press. As I'm trying to get the bench press up, I couldn't make it. The bar comes back down. And my buddy racks the bar for me, smacks me on the shoulder, and says, "Exactly where you want to be, failure." And for whatever reason, Lindsay, that was the first time it hit me that as athletes, we realize that it is the
Right.
point of failure that we strive for.
Mm-hmm.
And so why was it in so many other areas of my life that I walked around eggshells? I avoided failure when it's a biological requirement for growth, that without the stress in our world, that we don't have the capacity to grow if we're not meeting that stress. And the physiological concept is called hypertrophy. We know as no pain, no gain. After we go for that long hike, whatever, we're sore the next day. But the definition of hypertrophy is that when a muscle is subjected to stress or resistance, we adapt by growing. Our capabilities increase. And then what's the opposite of hypertrophy? Is atrophy. If we don't engage with the stress or resistance, then we atrophy. And our skills, our abilities, it operates in the same way.
Right. Okay. So I do have a question for you on this, but I just want to reach out to anyone watching. Again, if you're here with us, just let us know where you're watching from and what you're thinking so far about this analysis between, working out at the gym and where we push ourselves to failure, because that resonated with me absolutely, that's very normalized in that context. And then how you see that link to the rest of life. I'd just love you to drop that in the comments. And part of the thought I had was, well, maybe the reason we do that in the gym and not elsewhere is because it's normalized in the gym, right? That's the right thing to do. It's the right way to work out. Whereas in the rest of the world, that's not the right way. I mean, it may be, but the messages of that being the normalized thing to do are not the same. But the other question I had there, so I was thinking of my own experience. I used to be quite the gym rat, and didn't listen to my body very well, and got myself really, really injured. And so again, in making the link of pushing ourselves to failure, what are your thoughts on that in terms of the analogy with, because as an athlete, I'm not sure, I'm suspecting you were kind of always watching that line between pushing yourself to failure, but not into chronic, severe injury that would lead you to not being able to perform. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah. There are two things there. The chronic or massive failure as a result of over pushing yourself. It oftentimes that comes to not paying attention to the signals.
Yeah.
And we ignore the signals. There's a downside to grit and determination, right? When you block out the signals and become acutely focused on pursuing your goal, that sometimes things happen and it takes a nightmare to wake you up. Leaders who ignore feedback, the external signals that provide information to explore, you ignore them, all of a sudden, boom, a key team player leaves because they're not feeling valued. There are so many there are so many situations where it can take a nightmare to wake you up. If you pay attention to the signals, then you can make more responsible choices as to how you respond to situations. Do I keep going on this path? Do I make a slight pivot? Do I slow down the pace? Are all questions that we have to face when we're giving ourselves the chance to absorb the data.
Yeah, I like the nuance you're sharing there, right? That it's not the sort of that vision of heightened performance, not just being pushing the hardest you possibly can, but doing it while taking into consideration the signals that you're receiving and making nuanced decisions within that. That seems pretty smart.
You know, in part of our programs, we do 360 peer feedback reviews. And one of the elements we seek to find out are blind spots. Yeah. And a story that I tell when we're about to debrief it is when we were doing in-person work and I was going to a session to debrief 360s, I was backing into the parking structure. And I'm backing into the parking structure and my beeper goes off as I'm backing in. And I look in the rear view mirror and I look in the video screen. I've got like 6 feet before the parking block. So I keep backing up. The beeping intensifies. I look again, there's nothing. Until finally I keep backing up and smash, my back window smashes.
Oh, goodness.
Because there was a barrier that was sticking out above where my camera was looking. And metaphorically, we will do the same thing. If we don't pay attention to the beeping when it's early, then it can lead to something shattering.
Yeah, I see so many parallels here in terms of just managing stress in our daily lives, right? In terms of the little things, you know, we notice maybe that they're stressing us. It's not always that we haven't noticed them. It's just that, you know, sometimes maybe we haven't noticed it and haven't noticed the signals, but sometimes it's that we just sort of say, okay, I'll deal with that next time, right? Or I'll give myself space for this next time, when that's really kind of the foundation of managing that stress that allows you, I'm guessing as an athlete, that was something that was really sort of drilled into your ability to keep performing at such high levels like that, really being in tune, I guess, to your body and your emotional state and all of that. Is that, that's part of it there?
Being present, being aware. One of the models we work with that's a high performance model is 4 things: awareness, intention, exercise, and reflection. We get exposed to situations that give us an opportunity for increased awareness. So then we go, okay, well, what do I need to do different next time? That's where you start to get really intentional, which is basically your hypothesis. Then you exercise your hypothesis, whether it's in the boardroom or in the weight room, and then you get into reflection mode. Was my intention accurate? Did I achieve the objective? Just like an athlete watches game film, or we sit back and analyze our performance. That then leads back to the top of the cycle, which is ideally enhanced awareness. Yes, this works, or not quite. Here's how I need to reshape my intention and my exercise next time.
So where do you find in the workplace, is there one particular spot where you find people tend to get tripped up the most in those steps, or does it kind of depend on the person?
Well, the biggest barrier to anyone is making the time to do it. Right. Is we just, when we're busy, it's like we give ourselves permission to ignore a lot of things. It goes back to the responding to the signals in our environment. If we are head down just working away, then we can't see all of the data points, the feedback coming back to us so that we can change. And so it's carving out intentional time to, okay, start your day being very intentional. How do I want to show up in certain situations? And then a little look back or cool down at the end of the day. Did I show up in the way that I intended, etc.?
Yeah, and I'll go as far as to say that I think that sometimes unintentionally, that keeping busy, again, unintentionally, is a way of not slowing down to take a look at what are the pieces that aren't working, right? So I don't think people necessarily consciously decide to do that, but I think it's sort of a way to keep ourselves out of that reality of the present and looking at what's not working, because that's a hard process to go through sometimes, depending on, you know, what exactly we're talking about. But if you're a leader, there can be some big pieces to look at that can make you feel uncomfortable.
And again, discomfort is the pathway to accelerated growth.
Right. When you make that analogy again back to, lifting weights, it's the same thing, right? That burn is that's part of what brings you the growth. So it's a great analogy.
If you subscribe to the belief that engaging in the things that are uncomfortable are going to accelerate my development, then you can embrace a mindset, what we call meaningful masochism. If pain is a biological requirement for growth, then how do you make that meaningful? If we work on a team together and you're struggling with one of the ways that I'm working or how I'm behaving in the boardroom, how do you engage in the difficult process of giving me feedback and addressing that early on in service of our mission? We say to leaders that meaningful masochism is deliberately pursuing the discomfort and pain that lies on the path of your vision. And if that vision is resonant and clear enough, then you can engage with a lot of discomfort. But without that compelling vision and purpose, it's much easier to acquiesce, which then leads to atrophy, which can then lead to more significant injury.
Right. Okay, so I just want to pop off for a second and say hi. I know Mohammed's with us now. If there's anyone else here with us, you have any questions for Jayson, go ahead and throw those into the chat and I will share those with him as we go along. So I'm very much somebody who buys into the idea that growth comes through doing things that make us uncomfortable within, I think there's a limit to what people can tolerate within that range, like how uncomfortable something is making us feel. And I think there's sort of a proximal zone that where we can have our best growth. And yet I'm really not a believer of the no pain, no gain philosophy. And so you're making me really think, right? As you were talking, I was like, in some ways those are the same thing. And yet I buy into one and not the other. But I do think that ability to engage in that, those uncomfortable conversations and experiences as a leader, what I see is that people grow hugely in their role and then their teams grow with them as they do. So do you have some suggestions for people? So when we're looking at managing stress particularly, I think that it's a situation that a lot of leaders feel uncomfortable around in leading their teams, as I'm seeing through COVID, right? Where's the line of how much I discuss this with people on my team, right? What is my business? What's not? And so do you have some suggestions on how to do that?
The starting point that we take leaders through is take inventory of the stresses in your environment. And we call this tool the CSP inventory.
Okay.
Complaints, stressors, and pains. Your pains are a lot of what you and I spoke about. What are the most painful moments in the past? Extracting the learning. What wisdom, what learning did I get from that? Which will ideally inform how I respond differently next time, how I might get ahead of it. And then there's the current complaints and stressors. The complaints are those little irritations that they're not big enough right now, but really listing out all of the things that I might complain to my significant other about or my closest friends. I work with someone who's constantly late to meetings, or I work with someone who doesn't respect the deadlines. Any of the little complaints that we kind of shrug off as not very big of a deal to act on, but take inventory of those. And then the second column is to take inventory of the stressors. What are the problems that keep me up at night? Do I have to let someone go? Am I worried about keeping the lights on, the doors open in the business? Whatever it is. But that's the starting point, because if we don't list them out, then all of the stresses in our environment can feel like a giant tsunami of overwhelming stress and irritation. And so the first piece is just, let's take inventory of everything that I'm facing right now. And in fact, we tell leaders to keep their inventory active on a weekly basis, because what this inventory truly is then, if you step into the agency of exercising your leadership effectiveness, is then now I get to intentionally choose which ones I want to engage.
Mm,
For the most part, those complaints over time will compound and eventually they'll end up in the stressor column.
absolutely. Well, that was my thought because my work is a lot within communication. And so the examples you gave are actually the things that when not addressed, like I don't get called in when they're small and they're just a little irritation, but it's when they've compounded so much that now teams won't speak to one another, or there's just a lot of resentment. There's just, not necessarily open conflict, but just a lot of things going on under the surface that are really starting to affect the team's ability to work together well. And so absolutely, I can see how by not addressing them, it shifts columns, which again is kind of akin to what you were sharing earlier with the analogy of the gym, right? If you have a small something going on, an injury, whatever, and you don't do anything about it and you keep exposing yourself to, that's what I did. That's what got me. I did go to physio, but nevertheless, it moves columns when not addressed. So that makes a lot of sense. So once they've made their inventory, how do you pick which ones to address? Because I'm going to guess the list is relatively long nowadays.
Could be long. We then imagine you develop this robust inventory and your complaints and your stressors. You have this list. Give them letters A to Z. And what you can then do is plot them on what we call a stress matrix. Let's say the vertical axis is frequency. How often does it happen? Multiple times a day versus, annually. And then on the horizontal axis, intensity. Is it minor irritation or is it a significant pain? And just to plot them visually on the matrix now, it starts to separate them. You can see, okay, well, maybe the ones that are higher frequency, higher intensity, those are the ones that I might want to focus now because that will alleviate a lot of the pain and the pressure that I'm facing. And so that can be a starting point. Just it gives you the opportunity to see your stress and pain differently. And of course, Lindsay, as you know, when you see your world differently, then you can engage with it differently.
Mm-hmm. And so then how are leaders navigating this across their team? Because my experience is very much in my past role, working a lot with individuals with disabilities. And so the challenges and stressors in their environment are often very different than the challenges and stressors of colleagues. And so how does a leader take that individual variability when they're looking at their own stress, but then if they're extrapolating that to look at, now we're going to look at how we're going to do this as a team. How can you do that while taking into consideration individual variability?
Well, I think that's part of the art of leadership, right? Is being able to calibrate to different people and different situations. That's where it comes through. Like anything, if you want to be great at tennis or in the arts, it comes through the repetition to master your craft. And that's one of the challenges with leadership, as I'm sure you've seen in your work. A technical expert given a leadership position doesn't make a leader. If you don't practice the art of leadership and calibrating to the different people and situations, then you're just leading from a spreadsheet.
Yeah, that's a very good way to put it. I think of even back when open concept offices were, they still kind of are all the rage, but we'll see what happens post-COVID. But as I was watching it happening, I was thinking of, all the work I've done with people who are highly sensitive to noise and lights, thinking, this is not the best fit for them. This is going to be difficult. And I'm watching as there's more awareness, I find, happening around needing to adjust one's leadership style or, layout of an office, et cetera, to meet varied needs. And I'm really kind of excited to see where this will all lead. And when we look at COVID, for instance, the whole issue of who's going to be allowed to work from home and who's not. And there's so many opinions and debates around that. And I'm just, really hoping that it's a moment where leaders are taking some time to reflect on, yes, there's the needs of the business and there's the needs of the position and there's the needs of the individuals. And how do we navigate that in a way that doesn't solely meet one of those person's needs? And that doesn't mean that every situation will meet everyone's needs at all the time, but I feel like we are moving towards and need to develop more sensitivity to the fact that to have people perform at their best, there are different needs to attain that. And I can you speak to that a bit through your experience, if you've seen that even like within when you're on the bobsled team and any lessons there?
Well, I think there are two things when you say that. One, when I listen to what you're saying, is it just underscores the importance of meaningful leaders. It's for them, it's necessary to have empathy. If you don't engage with people with empathy, then you're never going to understand their needs, their wants in the first place. But then the second piece to that is what I truly believe is a shift that's happening in business now with possible work from home options, flex schedules, is people stepping into the place of agency. What agency do I have to really engineer the ideal environment for my work life balance, for my career trajectory? And something that we really encourage when we talk about the art of leadership and really activating potential and eliminating some of the unnecessary stress is, how do you activate and harness the agency in others?
Yeah, that's huge because so I was having a conversation with our daughter, and I can't remember the exact thing she had shared with me. She's 9, something that had happened at school last year. And I had said to her, well, you can tell the teacher that you don't like when they say that to you. And she said to me, no, I can't, because I'll be kept in for recess. And it gave me some great pause, because I thought, yeah, you're probably right. And yet I also want you to teach. I want to teach you to have the agency to advocate for what you need in the moment. And because I feel that we just learn, what my daughter has learned is don't speak up and say what you need right now, because you're going to get in trouble. And then we just grow up to, and I don't mean everybody, but some more than others and some not at all, but grow up to then bring that into our workplaces, right? Well, I need this. However, I don't even dare ask for it. And not all workplaces or all leaders are willing to have those conversations, but some are. And I think that stepping into that sense of agency is huge. And your point about the leader facilitating that, I think it opens it up much faster, right? Because if my daughter, again, to make the parallel, if she had seen that other kids are allowed to say things and not get in trouble, she would have that sense of agency in that setting, because it would feel safe to share what you want to share. So that's a really powerful point you made.
Well, I love what you're saying, because the bedrock of agency, I believe, is responsibility. And a story that we tell in our programs is Ignaz Semmelweis in the 1800s. Too many women were dying due to childbed fever. And so he started inspecting this, testing hypotheses, and he came up with a repeatable solution. How could he save so many women from dying? Well, he proposed that all physicians had to do was wash their hands. And of course, it was rejected in the medical world because it was too simple. It's not possible. And he was put in an insane asylum because this was so preposterous. But of course, what happened later, Louis Pasteur confirmed that his germ theory, and Semmelweis was right. And what's important about that is a couple of things. If our ego can get in the way and villainize the external world and victimize ourselves. And what Semmelweis showed, the lessons we can learn, it's always the little things that make the biggest difference. And lastly, in what ways am I responsible for infecting this situation? We trusted the physicians to be helping, but they were infecting the situation. And so if I truly want to exercise agency, the starting point is for me to step back and go, in what ways am I infecting the situation?
Mm-hmm.
By not asking the right questions, by not vocalizing my opinions, my wants, my needs, which over time then we disempower ourselves.
Yeah, and comes off as agreement in so many situations. And I really share your vision that it's the little things that make a difference, and the little things can feel safer, right? And when you're just starting out in asserting your needs, trying one of those little, like, there's the repercussions of saying a small thing are not generally that huge. I don't want to say they never are, but my experience has been that as people start to do that, they start to realize, oh, that was a lot easier than I anticipated. Right. And so that experience of seeing that the predicted outcome wasn't necessarily as drastic as you imagined, then empowers you to try it again and try it a little bit more and try it with someone a little more senior or a little more assertive and all that. So I totally believe that's the core. I just want to go to the comments here for a second. So Joseph, I don't know if you're still here with you, but it is nice to see you back. It's been a while. And if anyone has questions here for Jayson, please do jump into the comments. I see this part of the little things having the most impact as being such a big part of stress management too, whether that's in our interactions or in, the other choices we make. And I feel like there's been a shift lately where stress used to be seen as, I don't know how to verbalize this, but like really the big things, right? So, I don't know, like making sure you take your vacation time, and I'm not coming up with a lot of other concrete examples. And although those things are important, I also think, so somebody said to me once, build a business that you don't need to take a vacation from. Not to say don't take a vacation, but build a life that you don't feel like you're constantly needing to escape from. And for me, a lot of that has been focusing on those little things rather than, like, yes, also making sure I take a vacation, but that big thing isn't quite enough to sustain over the long term. So what are some of those little things that leaders can be facilitating in the workplace? You've already talked about fostering a sense of agency. Do you have any other tips here?
Oh, well, there are many little things leaders can do. We live in a world of viral contagion. That's our reality right now.
Good way to put it.
For the last 10 years, viral contagion has been a central point of our model. Whether we like it or not, as leaders, we're always spreading viruses through what we say, the actions we take. They spread, they're viruses. And we classify viruses in this context as there are good viruses that create critical momentum towards a vision, and negative viruses that create cancerous downward spirals. But everything from, if I spread a virus in the organization that celebrates the busy badge. How are you? Oh, I'm busy. And I'm sending emails, team messages, text messages, Slack at all hours of the night. What's the virus I'm spreading to my organization? Well, whether I say at an all hands meeting or not that, hey, work-life balance is important, if I'm sending messages at all times of the day, then I'm telling people that this is how you become successful in this business. Regardless of what I say, if I'm a leader, I'm a walking billboard that advertises how to be successful here. And people will dismiss what I say and do what I do, in many cases, if they're using me as a model of success. Yeah. And so one of the things that leaders can do is analyze the viruses that they spread or that are spread around the organization. What are the narratives people create? For example, a leader that we work with, Friday at 3 p.m., deliberately sent a message to the team. I'm heading out early to go fishing because this is what I love to do. I hope all of you are leaving to go do something you love to do. An intentional virus that was spread. Another leader She wanted to spread a virus around owning your blind spots. And she got a 360 feedback from her peers. Some of it wasn't great. But she took this as a great opportunity, presented it to the management team, and said, look, here's what you said. I hear you. I want to get better. And here's how I'm going to be working on it. And so now, instead of hiding what could be deficiencies or getting angry, she now started socializing it. Look, we're all a work in progress. Because, if she can claim that in front of everyone else, then hopefully they can claim it as well, rather than holding it as this heavy anvil that I secretly have to drag behind me. Let's express some vulnerability and socialize it and normalize it, like you said earlier.
Well, and normalizing, I guess, also just that idea that you are more than just your profession or what you're doing in the workplace, right? Like that little peek into, that he enjoys fishing and that he's going to take some time off to do so, sort of normalizing that whole, right? That it's not just this, I feel when I entered the workplace, gosh, I don't know, almost 20 years ago now, it very much was like this division, right, between home and life. And I think there's some good of that, but I do think that the move towards bringing more of your whole self into the workplace, to the extent that people are comfortable, it normalizes, like you say, the realness of the person, the relatability, because then I'm not feeling as badly when I get some negative feedback, which frankly we're all going to get because no one is perfect. And so it's a huge step forward, I think, in the right direction.
When you say negative feedback, there's something we say to leaders when they go through a debrief, that we say, if you do a 360 next year, we hope you get more negative feedback.
Yes.
Because that means that you're reaching out, you're taking risks. Of course, it's not unconsciously, you're not trying to create an unconscious mess. But if you're pushing boundaries and growing, chances are people may not like that. And if you're taking a stand for something that's important to you, then chances are it might rub people the wrong way. Just be intentional about it.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's ways we can then develop the skills to navigate those conversations, right? So it just gets you another step closer, I guess, towards being able to navigate that situation versus not engaging in it at all. So that's awesome. So I just want to give one last chance for anyone listening. If anyone has any questions here for Jayson on leading a team to manage their stress more effectively, managing your own stress more effectively as a leader, please go ahead and drop those in the chat. And I guess, in the meantime, so you have your program that you've co-created, the Science Behind Success. And so you're delivering this within organizations. Am I understanding that correctly?
We deliver it both inside organizations, and we have open enrollment programs, which has really been one of the greatest gifts of COVID when a lot of our in-person work around North America evaporated when the borders closed. We experimented with open enrollment programs where now, instead of just having intact cohorts inside organizations, now with the virtual delivery, we're having leaders from organizations from Philadelphia to San Francisco to Atlanta to Edmonton joining the programs. And it's been a real interesting and welcomed gift, because now we're getting a cross section and a diverse group of leaders who now, if we get into a room and we're in the same company, we can say, oh yeah, well, this is just an issue that our company faces. But when I'm paired up with a peer from a completely different industry, and I hear you've got the same problems as me,
right,
then I can't blame the organization. Now I get to step in the place of responsibility. Right. How do we change this?
Right. Well, because at the end of the day, so when I switched from what I was doing before to corporate, I had this thought of, I think this really fits because people are people, right? And I work in human interactions, but also felt a little nervous around, I'm not sure I understand the nuances, of how this works in corporate. And the more I did, the more I realized, yeah, same stuff, different terminology and different, but like the core of the challenges, because we're humans, is very much the same. And what I hear from what you're saying is that being able to recognize that commonality, right, amongst ourselves, is just a big step, I think, towards being able to, I don't want to say resolve the challenges necessarily, but start to view them, I guess, differently, like you say, right? Rather than being the fault of the organization, which kind of we're stuck. We're in that, when we're in that phase, right, of looking at it, this is your problem. And if I switch organizations, this is all going to go away. Where in reality, what I see is doing so, we all bring our own stuff to the new organization and we find someone else we engage in the same patterns with, and we kind of tend to repeat. So by being able to have that awareness, I can see where it brings people to a space of being able to look at, okay, what am I going to do differently here?
I love it. Exactly. Right. If someone's going through a challenge, it's natural to say, I'm going to jump across the street to a different organization. But we've seen it so many times. The honeymoon period burns off when you jump over, and the same stuff. So let's get really clear about exercising the stressors in your environment. And if I'm in a program with you, you're in a different organization, and we normalize the stress that maybe we're both experiencing, that helps manage the stress, because now maybe you and I can collaborate on what a solution to move forward is. Because if I don't exercise this stressor, then I'm stepping back and risking atrophy. So then the stressor, while it may leave for a little bit, if I jump across the street, it is going to come back.
Right. Yeah, that's a perfect way to put it. All right. So I guess last thing would be just to ask you where people can find your work if they're interested in learning more and learning about your open cohort for their organizations. Where should they reach out to you, Jayson?
They can visit me at level52.ca, learn more about our accelerated leadership programs. All of our spring stuff is full, but we've got some space in our fall programs, and we'd love to get some participants ready to roll up their sleeves and exercise their leadership.
Awesome. All right. So I'd invite everyone to take a peek over www.level52.ca. And on that note, I just want to thank you for coming over here and sharing your experience with us. And it sounds like you're doing some really great work in the world.
Hey, thanks so much, Lindsay. It's great to join you.
So for everyone listening, thanks for joining again. I'm sticking to every second week for now as things still kind of iron out over here with our son. So we'll be back in 2 weeks, a Wednesday at 6 p.m. And we're going to be joined by Melanie Parrish, who's going to talk to us about being an experimental leader. So a really interesting concept. And I hope you will join us then. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you back next week. Bye for now.